Hello and welcome to another educational video about screen printing by Catspit Productions. Today's video is a quick tips video, quick tips for screen printing. I just wanted to quickly review perhaps the proper usage of a curable reducer, a Plastisol ink additive. There has been a lot of discussion and questions lately about adding a curable reducer to your white ink for printing directly on black shirts. And let me say, in my opinion, a curable reducer is ideal for actually reducing pickup. They're really intended, the curable reducer is really intended to reduce ink pickup from one screen to the other when you're printing wet, so that when you print one color down and then you go with the next color on top wet, the ink will stick to the back of the screen less. So it has detacking agents that allow the ink to stick less to the back of an emulsion coated screen as you print wet. So ideally, that's the use for a curable reducer. Curable reducer means that it's like the Plastisol ink itself in that it will cure at about 330 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. However, that means that a lot of people think they can add as much of the curable reducer to the ink as they want, and that's not true, because the more you add, the less ink you really have, and the more you're working with just curable reducer. And ink, the way it's manufactured and designed from the vendors, is designed to shear properly between the squeegee, the mesh, and the t-shirt when you're stroking. And it's designed to flow through the mesh properly. It's designed for opacity. It's designed specifically to do a lot of things, and that is especially true with high opacity inks like white or high opacity reds or anything that's a high opacity ink that may be intended to print onto a dark garment like a black directly with no underbase. Those are inks that tend to be more expensive, right? Because they're high opacity, and we pay more for them. So when you add a curable reducer, say, to a high opacity white ink that you're going to print directly on a black shirt, you're actually hurting yourself because you're destroying the qualities and the characteristics of the ink that you've paid dearly for from the manufacturer. So curable reducer can affect the way the ink shears when you stroke and you shear it between the mesh and the squeegee, and when you have that off contact and the screen is rolling and there's a shear factor there. It can affect that. It can affect the way the ink flows through the mesh, and it can also change, of course, the opacity. It can reduce the opacity or the coverage of the ink. So if you're doing white ink on black, adding a curable reducer to make it thinner and easier to work with really is counterproductive, because then you have to put more ink on there to achieve that opacity. And it can also change the hue of an ink, like a black ink, like this one, to maybe a more milky color or a creamy color, and it can often make the ink look a lot more glossy when it's wet. So it can change the final appearance of the ink itself in its color hue. It can get a little milky, it can get a little pastel, it can just change things a little bit. So you have to be aware of that. So I recommend that if you're printing wet on wet and you want to reduce pickup, then you can use a curable reducer. That's fine. Otherwise, if you're using it just to thin out, I would only use it on dark inks like black, reds, maroons, or really powerful, potent, pigment-filled inks that you're going to print on a light-colored garment. So you're not concerned so much with the opacity, and they're heavy, strong colored inks that aren't going to be affected too much in color. You can use a curable reducer. When not to use it is, like I said before, on a high opacity ink which you're printing directly onto a black garment or a dark garment without an underbase. Then you wouldn't want to use a curable reducer in that situation if you could help it. Okay? Let's see, I think that's about all we can say. Now, curable reducers will vary in color and texture and consistency and such from brand to brand, and mixing suggestions will vary from brand to brand. But let me just show you really quick how much I would add to this little blob of black ink I have here. I have some black ink that's really thick, and it's just really thick and hard to work with, and it picks up on the back of screens like crazy. So I tend to add a little bit of curable reducer to it just because it doesn't seem like it should be so thick, you know what I'm saying? And I find that it works a little bit better, but I only add a little bit. So let me show you how little bit I add. Alright, so I have you zoomed in here for a close-up of this little pile of black ink here. And hopefully we're just on the press here, so hopefully it won't move too much, because this ink is really thick. Alright, and ideally you wouldn't do this on a paper plate, you know, because that is not going to be good. But I just want to show you just, you know, a little bit how this additive looks, and, you know, how much I might add to this little tiny bit of ink. And there you go, okay? And that even could have been slightly too much. All right, so there it is. It looks like a really thin Elmer's glue. And then we're just going to mix it in. Okay, sorry, my paper plate's moving around a little bit. I really need to get some plastic quart containers and such to mix ink and stuff. If you're ever in, you know, if you have a piece of plexiglass or a piece of glass, that's really a lot better to mix ink on than a piece of paper. Okay, so there it is. And I don't know if you can tell on camera, but it actually gets a little bit milky looking, and it loses that black depth that, you know, that it has out of the bucket. So it loses a little bit, but for a black ink when you're printing, you know, that's nothing that anybody will ever notice. You know what I'm saying? So black is one of those colors that will take an additive quite well. Okay, so that's it. Alright, so that's it for today on the curable reducers. I hope those little tips helped you. If you're looking for a Plastisol ink additive that will thin the ink and just make it a little bit easier to work with, probably a soft hand base or a Plastisol thinner. If you can find something that's specifically called thinner, made by a Plastisol ink manufacturer, then I would use that or a soft hand base as opposed to the curable reducer for just thinning it out. You know what I'm saying? So that's it. All right. Hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that helped you a little bit with curable reducers and using them with Plastisol inks. And please remember that the Catspit Productions website is full of information, and there is actually an article on the article archives page of the website called Common Plastisol Ink Additives, and it gives you a rundown on some of the most common Plastisol ink additives, and you can find that on the Catspit Productions website at catspitproductionsllc.com. There's a link below in the video description, and also don't forget, Catspit Productions website now has a screen printing forum that has been designed and built specifically for you all learning how to screen print. So it's set up around the process. I encourage you to check that out, take a look at it at the website, sign up, and feel free to post questions there. And that's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate your time. And if you like what you see, rate thumbs up, comment below, and of course subscribe. We'll see you next time.